What's up? This is Score Study with me, Brian Kroc. Okay, so I was planning to release an awesome video this week about arranging music for recorder choir featuring none other than Sarah Jeffrey, but then I YouTubed Stairway to Heaven and everything changed. Stairway to Heaven features bass, tenor, and alto recorders played by Led Zeppelin's bassist John Paul Jones. And while everyone is obsessed with talking about the guitar riff, the lawsuits, the lyrics, no one ever talks about how fundamentally important the recorders are in the overall arrangement. But the first part in this 2-video series is going to be about the music theory behind the opening guitar riff. See, many great music theory YouTubers have given their take on the harmonic content of the song, but they've all been wrong.
Everyone is wrong about Stairway to
No, but seriously, in this video, I'm going to be making an argument for the importance of historical context in musical analysis, how idiomatic instrumental writing forces note choices, and how, in the end, Stairway to Heaven is just one link in a long chain of musical laments that stretches centuries.
Part 1 Cancelled.
Like every other young guitar student in the world, as soon as I learned that Stairway to Heaven riff, I could not stop playing it. There is a good reason why this guitar part is famously and hilariously banned from guitar stores.
No Stairway. Denied.
It's really right in that sweet spot between too easy to play so it's not interesting and too hard to play so you give up trying. Jimmy Page said about the riff that he was trying to write a poor man's Bouree by Bach. Well, he succeeded. Nailed it.
Part 2 It is Bach and it rocks.
Okay, so most guitar players have definitely tried to play Bach's Bouree before, but for those of you who are unfamiliar, here's what you need to know. The Bouree comes from one of Bach's lute suites, BWV 996 to be exact, written sometime in the early 18th century, but the exact date isn't known. Looking at the sheet music, you will see quite clearly that in his contrapuntal writing, Bach was using exclusively contrary motion. Contrary motion simply refers to music in which two lines of counterpoint move in opposing directions. One line goes up, the other line goes down, or vice versa. Contrary motion sounds great because it gives the music feeling of expansion and contraction. To explain this idea, I'm going to try to sort of reverse engineer the process of composing Bach's Bouree. Imagine that you've written this melody. You say to yourself, God damn, I'm a good composer because this melody is catchy and it has a groovy repetitive rhythm, da da da, da da da, it makes you want to dance. It establishes our home key of E minor very obviously, and it fits really nicely on the lute. So let me try to harmonize it now. The lute is a polyphonic instrument. Lute players have 5 fingers that they can use, well, really like 4 fingers, but so let's try to exploit the polyphonic nature of the instrument and let's write some counterpoint. Well, if we look at our options for how to harmonize this first melody, we can basically rule out every option except for the very option that Bach himself chose. And I'll show you what I mean by that. We know that this bass line had to start either on an E, G, or a B because those are the 3 notes in an E minor triad. E, G, B. Well, if we want to start on an E, we can't move down because E is the lowest note on the lute. So if we move up, we get parallel octaves, which is like the main big no-no of Baroque counterpoint rules. So that's immediately ruled out. Now, what if we start our counterpoint on B? Up. That sounds all right. That doesn't sound bad at all. We'll table that. What if we went down? So to our ears, that probably isn't a great option because it lands on a strong downbeat with these Gs. It makes the key sound like G major rather than E minor. So that's not a good option. Our final option is starting on G. And if we move up, this also isn't a great option because we land on the second inversion of E minor with a B in the bass. It's just not a very strong sound. And also, this passing chord in A and an F sharp, it really sort of obscures that passing chord. So let's try starting on G but going down. Now, this is the best option, obviously, for a few reasons. One, it exploits the open strings of the guitar so beautifully. So we have this powerful, open, ringing E. The other beautiful thing about this option is that the bass line is the inversion of the melody. E, F sharp, G, and G, F sharp, E at the same time. So hearing the inversion of the melody played in the bass, it has just this awesome sort of cosmic balance that you'd want to exploit. So we're going to go with this option of starting our counterpoint on G and going down. And if you're a composer with your salt, you're going to notice immediately, this is contrary motion. What if we tried to sustain contrary motion for the duration of this opening melodic figure? Well, then whenever the melody goes down, like the next part of the line, our bass line has to go up. So, perfect. Now the line's going back up, so our bass line goes down. So the one exception to the contrary motion is this sort of jarring jump down from F sharp down a fifth to B. It sort of breaks the linear nature of the melody. Put a pin in that because it'll be important in a second. Okay, so keeping the Bouree in mind, now let's look at Stairway to Heaven. Jimmy Page's melody moves up stepwise a minor third, exactly like Bach's Bouree, except in the key of A minor. So those are the melody notes. So if we were trying to write
A Poor Man's Bouree by Bach,
we would definitely try to exploit the contrary motion. So we're in the key of A minor, so we'll start on the root. That's always a good choice. Since the melody goes up, our bass line needs to go down. The melody goes up, the bass line goes down. And what's really cool to me is that this even has that jarring jump down from C to F sharp, which is so eerily similar to that jump down. Remember this descending bass, because it's going to become very important shortly.
Part 3. The harmony.
Let's continue this reverse engineering process. Now that we have a very strong melody and a perfectly matched bass line, we have to fill it in with some harmony. For this, the most important thing to remember is that Bach was writing for the lute and Jimmy Page was writing for the guitar. He wasn't writing out of context or on a sheet of manuscript paper for any possible instrument. He was writing specifically for the guitar. Jimmy Page simply filled these chords in with the most obvious choices that are idiomatic or natural to the guitar. Let's try it ourselves. The first chord is easy. Our bass note is A and our melody note is A. So we just have to fill in the chord with the notes in A minor that are under our fingers. And in this case, they happen to be C and E. So we have a A minor triad, and conveniently, 3 of the notes we're able to get by barring with one finger. The second chord is not so obvious, and I've seen lots of different attempts of varying quality to explain its ambiguity. One unnamed YouTube channel describes this as a G-sharp augmented chord, which is an understandable choice, but still very far off the mark, and I'll tell you why. First of all, we can't just ignore notes that don't conveniently fit within an arbitrary framework that we've chosen. The chord in question has 4 different pitches: G sharp, C, and E, which, yes, that is a G-sharp augmented triad. But then the most important note in the chord, because it's the melody, is B, which has nothing to do with a G-sharp augmented triad. Additionally, G-sharp augmented triads don't really serve a function in the key of A minor, so it's just not a great choice. I've seen another unnamed YouTuber with a great channel make an attempt at explaining this second chord, and his explanation is better because it takes the harmonic context into consideration. But yet again, he chooses to ignore a note that doesn't fit within an arbitrarily chosen framework. He chooses to call this an E triad because E is the 5 in the key of A minor. 1, 5, 1. So it makes sense. But still, this YouTuber explains away that C, which isn't in an E triad, saying that it's something like a suspension from the previous chord. I'm not satisfied with that as an answer. The truth is that, were we to try to name this chord, it would be most accurate to say E7 flat 13 over G sharp. But this would still be an incorrect analysis of the passage. E7 flat 13 is a spicy, spicy jazz chord. The flat 13 in this case is the C, because the natural 13 on an E7 chord is C sharp. If you lower it a half step, you get a flat 13. And this is part of the family of altered chords, where you're making alterations to the upper extensions. It's somewhat related to what we call the Hendrix chord, which is an E7 with a sharp 9. And in jazz, you'll often find a sharp 9 accompanied by a flat 13. Anyways, why did I say that this would be an incorrect analysis? Because Jimmy Page would never, ever, ever in a million years have called this chord an E7 flat 13 over G sharp. He would have shrugged his shoulders and he would have said, I thought it sounded good. So, sorry for the horrible impression, Jimmy. I love you and respect you. The reason being is that this is idiomatic to the guitar. The thing that makes guitars sound big and full and lush is letting the strings ring out. Were Jimmy to have chosen to move his hand shape to accommodate a real E triad, he would lose these ringing notes. So what he's really doing here is just exploiting the guitar for what it does best. While I'm at it, I also seriously take issue with calling this third chord a C triad, which is what every analysis that I've seen on YouTube does. And it makes sense to call it that in some regard because the only notes present are G, C, E, and another C. And those notes make up a C triad. But it's still an inaccurate analysis because I don't think that's the function that it's serving in this context. Here's the way I see it. The first 3 chords of Stairway to Heaven are just an extended A minor triad with a bass line that some people might call a walk down. A walk down is exactly what it sounds like. If you were to take an A minor triad, C, E, and A, and move the bass line down chromatically, you would be getting an A minor over A, an A minor over G sharp, an A minor over G, an A minor over F sharp, etc. This is an extremely common chord progression, and what it is doing is it's prolonging the sound of A minor with a bunch of different tensions that these new bass notes create. Believe it or not, this chord progression has been ubiquitous around the world for centuries, and my man György Ligeti calls it
Lamento melodies.
I still love you.
Part 4, Lamento.
So, remember when Led Zeppelin was sued for supposedly plagiarizing Stairway to Heaven?
Zeppelin is accused of stealing the song Stairway to Heaven from a song called Taurus by the band Spirit. The lawsuit has been dragging on for nearly 2 years, almost enough time to listen to Stairway to Heaven.
There's a reason why Stairway to Heaven sounds so similar to an earlier song called Taurus by the lesser-known band Spirit. It's because this chord progression is just not a particularly original idea. In fact, you can find extremely similar sounding music in cultures all over the world. In his second book, Listen to This, music critic Alex Ross describes the universal Lamento Motif. And this thing has been around essentially since the history books have recorded music.
La, sol, fa, mi, la, sol, fa, mi. So a descending Phrygian.
Check out this lament from a 12th century liturgical drama called The Play of Daniel. Now check out similar sounding songs of grief from Kazakhstan, Russia, and Hungary.
Ох ты, мятюшка, тошнёхонько, а порядовны вы мои подружачки, и порядовны задушевные, а ты, Оксения, да дочь Ильи сня, а Катерина, ты да дочь Федотовна. Jaj, mit vétettem a nagy Úristennek, hogy elvette az én szeretke béli páromat. Jaj, Fárkó, Fárkó, Buda, Fárkó. Jaj, hova legyek, mit csináljak?
Now check out Ray Charles. What do all these clips have in common? Well, their music descends a fifth in a musical gesture that mimics the sound of a human's cries of despair. It might surprise you that instrumental music itself was not always intended to express emotion. In the medieval era, composers set similar sounding music to lyrics about a variety of different subjects. But according to Ross, one of the earliest instances of truly expressive music came in the form of that lament we heard earlier from the Play of Daniel. Over the years, this downward musical figure of a whole step, followed by a whole step, followed by a half step, seeped into humanity's musical imagination as an obvious signifier of sadness. So much so that in 1597, composer and music theorist Thomas Morley wrote, "Where your ditty speaketh of descending lowness, depth and hell, and others such, you must make your music descend." In his 8th book of madrigals from 1638, Claudio Monteverdi wrote the Lamento della ninfa, in which a woman begs, "Let my love return to me as he was before, or take me then and kill me, so I rack myself no more." Basically, she was a 17th century stan. The ostinato bass figure sounds eerily similar to Stairway to Heaven, doesn't it? Lamento della ninfa became somewhat of a blueprint for how to write laments as opera grew in popularity over the 17th and 18th centuries. One of Monteverdi's proteges, Francesco Cavalli, added an extra dimension of dissonance to this lamenting bass figure by filling it in with chromatic pitches. J.S. Bach inherited this descending musical device, but dispensed with the over-the-top operatic trappings, instead writing music that was intended to incite devotion to God. Nowhere is this clearer than in his B minor Mass, written in the last years of his life, in which he painfully depicts Jesus' suffering on the cross with a descending chromatic scale. Fast forward a century and a half, and you'll hear this descending bass line all over in early blues recordings. Check out Alex Ross's website for hordes of examples, including one from none other than Led Zeppelin, playing Dazed and Confused live at the LA Forum in 1972. And guess what? Stairway to Heaven wasn't the only copyright lawsuit that Led Zeppelin faced in the 21st century. Jake Holmes recorded a similar sounding song called Dazed and Confused 2 years before Led Zeppelin did. Again, this is not very surprising because of the pervasiveness of this common musical cliché. Part 5. Conclusion. Be thee neither dazed nor confused. So if you're skeptical that the sound of humans' cries of despair could have influenced the entire trajectory of musical development, you might check out Sound Sentiment by Peter Kivy. Kivy argues that musical expression generally falls under two categories: contours, which mimic human speech or behavior, and conventions, which listeners in a particular culture will know to associate with a particular psychological state. In this case, Stairway to Heaven does both, which might give us a partial explanation into its universality and seeming timelessness. Its contour is extremely common because it mimics the universal human reaction to grief, or its resultant spiritual descent into the underworld. It is as old as music itself, and if I were a gambling man, I would bet that it will continue to be so. But Stairway to Heaven is also a convention. It exploits the acoustic guitar so perfectly, creating a sound that humans have learned over centuries to associate with the lone bard's storytelling or myth building. So when Robert Plant's lyrics enter, we are extremely receptive to whatever they have to say. But I submit to you that Stairway to Heaven would have been a much less successful song without the recorders in the introduction, which John Paul Jones had to fight for and which have been copied and parodied ever since. Stay tuned for my next video featuring the inimitable Sarah Jeffrey to learn why. My point in making this video was just to suggest that music analysis is about so much more than just isolating a group of notes on a piece of manuscript paper and then coldly describing them. We always need to keep historical perspective, as well as social, political, geographical, and any other kind of perspective that we can muster, because they all influence the music. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please click like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters, and stay tuned for next week's video.